Nina struggled to maneuver both the shopping cart and the baby stroller, her arms aching from the effort. The twin boys, only 1 year old, sat quietly, their big eyes curiously scanning the busy supermarket. She had no choice but to bring them along. She was their nanny, and there was nowhere else to leave them. Her roommate, Fiona, the woman who had practically forced her into this babysitting arrangement, had refused to do the shopping herself and had left only a small amount of money for the essentials. Nina had to make every coin count because there was barely any food left at home. After paying for the groceries, she packed everything up and stepped outside, waiting for the ride back to the apartment. As she stood there, adjusting the bags, a woman nearby spoke excitedly on the phone. "They accepted me," the woman exclaimed. "I just got my interview date." Nina's heart sank. She forced a small smile, but inside, she felt a deep sadness. Why couldn't something like that happen to her? She had applied for countless jobs, yet none had responded. She sighed, pulling out her phone to distract herself. Absent-mindedly scrolling through her emails, she nearly skipped past one before freezing in place. Her breath caught as she opened it, her fingers trembling. She had been shortlisted for a job interview. Her emotions clashed, happiness and horror battling inside her. It was great news, but there was a problem. The interviews were happening right now, and her scheduled time was in less than an hour. Panic gripped her. What was she going to do? She couldn't miss this opportunity. It was the whole reason she had left the village, to find a good job and support her struggling family. Just then, her ride arrived. Without hesitation, she gathered the twins and the groceries, hurriedly getting into the taxi. When they reached the apartment, she turned to the driver. "Please, wait for me just a few minutes," she begged. She rushed inside, the boys still in her arms, and hurriedly packed a small bag, diapers, food, wipes. Her hands fumbled as she searched for her credentials. Then, with no time to waste, she changed into the best professional outfit she could find, a black office skirt and a pink blouse. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. With no one to leave the boys with, she had no choice. They were coming with her. The taxi sped through the city, and they arrived safely at the company's entrance. Nina hurried out, spotting a security guard. "Please, can you help me with the stroller and my bag?" she pleaded breathlessly. The guard gave her a puzzled look but nodded, helping her as she carried the twins in her arms and rushed inside. The moment she entered, all heads turned. The reception area fell silent as people stared at her, young woman, 2 toddlers in hand, running into a corporate office. "Excuse me, good morning," she greeted the receptionists, trying to catch her breath. They blinked at her, stunned. "How can we help you, madam?" one finally asked. "I'm here for a job interview," Nina said, still panting. "Could you please tell me what floor I need to go to?" The receptionist gaped at her. "You came for a job interview with 2 toddlers?" she asked, disbelief clear in her voice. Nina swallowed. She knew exactly how unprofessional this looked, but what choice did she have? She had no one to leave them with. Daycare was too expensive. And she couldn't just hand someone's children over to a stranger, not without informing their parents. The problem was, she didn't even know their parents. Fiona did, but calling her was not an option. If Fiona found out Nina was job hunting, she would throw her out without a second thought. "I know this seems bizarre," Nina admitted, her voice calm but desperate. "But I had no other option. I promise, they're well-behaved boys. They won't disturb anyone." The receptionists exchanged glances, sympathy flickering in their eyes. But they also knew the harsh reality. This wasn't a good look for a candidate. Didn't she get the interview notice early enough? Couldn't she have found a solution beforehand? Still, after a brief hesitation, they directed her to the waiting area. Nina hurried up, her legs aching from the rush. The moment she entered, the other candidates turned to stare at her. Some exchanged whispers. A few raised their eyebrows. She didn't care. Her arms throbbed from carrying the boys, and her feet ached from running in stilettos. She gently set the twins down, allowing them to stand on their small feet. The little boys looked around in wonder, fascinated by the unfamiliar place. Nina crouched beside them, brushing a hand over their tiny heads. "You two have been so good," she whispered lovingly. Such good boys. It amazed her how well they had behaved, as if they understood she was in a rush. She adored these children. But she needs a real job. She wasn't being paid for this babysitting. Her salary was a roof over her head and food, as Fiona had coldly reminded her many times. That wasn't enough. She needed more. Nina's eyes darted around the room, searching for the kindest-looking person. Someone she could trust, for just a few minutes, to watch the boys while she stepped in for her interview. As she looked around the room, her eyes scanning for a friendly face, a young man dressed in a crisp, white shirt suddenly strode toward her. At first, she thought he was coming to scold her for letting the twins wander around. But as he drew closer, she realized something odd. His attention wasn't really on her. He was staring at the boys. His expression was frozen in shock, his wide eyes locked onto the twins as if he had just seen a ghost. The tension in the air thickened as others began to take notice, their curious gazes shifting toward the unfolding scene. Nina's heart pounded. Why is he looking at them like that? She cleared her throat, trying to draw his focus away from the children. Excuse me, sir. Can I help you in any way? The young man barely acknowledged her. His voice was urgent when he finally spoke. Who brought these kids here? Nina's breath hitched. Was she in trouble? Maybe children weren't allowed in such a prestigious company. Of course they aren't, she scolded herself. This is one of the best corporations in this city. She had already been hesitant about coming for the interview. She didn't want to embarrass herself, but she had no choice. Sir, sorry about this, she said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. But I promise, they won't be a disturbance at all. The man's sharp gaze flicked to her, his urgency not fading. Who are you? Nina swallowed hard. His reaction was more than just concern about the children being here. It was something else, something deeper. I'm just here for the job interview, sir, she answered, keeping her tone professional. The man looked at her as if she had just said something impossible. Then, without warning, he reached out, attempting to pick up one of the boys. Nina reacted instantly, pulling the twins protectively into her arms. The man didn't argue. Instead, he turned on his heel and bolted away, leaving Nina there, bewildered. What on earth was that about? Meanwhile, in a high-pressure boardroom on the upper floor, the air was suffocating. Employees sat frozen in their seats, their faces pale with stress. The room was silent, except for the furious voice of Logan Hadrian, their boss. Logan was not a man to tolerate failure, and today, his patience had completely snapped. He loomed over the table, reprimanding his employees for a project they had spent months working on. Their efforts meant nothing to him. They weren't good enough. And now, under the weight of his degrading words, they all silently prayed for a miracle, something, anything, to save them from his wrath. No one dared to move. Even breathing too loudly felt like a crime. Logan's rage was a storm, and there was no escaping it. Then, suddenly, the doors burst open. All heads snapped toward the entrance. Robert stood there, his breathing heavy, urgency written all over his face. Logan's glare locked onto him like a predator spotting its prey. Robert felt his knees weaken. Sir, I need to talk to you, he stammered. It's very important. Logan's gaze darkened, his patience wearing dangerously thin. He was already furious. Now his foolish assistant had the audacity to interrupt him? He leaned back in his chair, his voice like ice. The reason you interrupted me better be important, he warned, because otherwise, Lord help you, Robert, you have no idea what I'll do to you. Robert swallowed hard. He knew the risk of speaking now, but he also knew that this was far too important to ignore. Sir, can I speak to you outside, please? He asked hesitantly. Logan's eyes flashed with disbelief. Did Robert just ask him, the CEO, to leave this room? Robert, he said slowly, his voice carrying a deadly undertone, did you just tell me to get up and follow you out? Robert realized his mistake. Logan wasn't going to move. Knowing he had no choice, Robert took a cautious step forward, intending to whisper the news. But Logan was already out of patience. Speak up or get out, he thundered, his voice shaking the walls. The employees nearly jumped out of their seats. Robert flinched but wasted no time. "Sir, there's a woman down where interviews are happening," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "She said she came for a job interview." A heavy silence fell over the room. The employees pitied Robert, but none of them could help him. They had their own problems to deal with. Logan scoffed, his irritation deepening. "So, Robert, you interrupted me to talk about a woman?" Robert shook his head quickly. "Sir, that's not it." He took a deep breath before dropping the bombshell. "This particular lady, I don't recognize her, but she is here with Tyler and Dylan." A pause. Robert steadied himself before finishing his sentence. "Your sons, sir." The shift in the room was instant. The fear in the air changed to pure shock. The employees exchanged confused glances. They had never seen Logan's children before, but Robert had. As Logan's personal assistant, he had been to his house many times. And if Robert was saying the CEO's sons were downstairs, chances are he likely knows what he's talking about. Logan's entire demeanor changed. His anger didn't fade, it sharpened. He stood up abruptly. "Take me there." Robert obeyed immediately, leading the way while Logan fired off questions. "Tell me everything. How did they get here? Who is this woman? What did she say?" Robert explained all he knew, but Logan wasn't listening anymore. And when they arrived, when Logan laid eyes on the scene before him, he was stunned. His own sons were in the arms of a stranger, a woman he had never seen before. Yet the boys, they were happy, happier than he had ever seen them. Tyler and Dylan giggled, their tiny hands reaching for the woman, their faces full of joy. She held them so gently, so naturally, as if they belonged to her, as if they knew her. But Logan, their father, did not. He has no idea who she is. His jaw tightened. He was about to storm over, ready to take his sons and demand an explanation when a security guard approached, pushing a stroller and carrying a bag. Nina turned to him with a relieved smile. "Thank you so much," she said sincerely. "You didn't have to bring these all the way here. I was just so desperate to get to the line early. I was already late as it is." Nina gently placed the twins in their strollers, her touch tender and familiar. She fastened their bibs and handed each a milk bottle she had packed earlier. The boys eagerly accepted, sucking on them contentedly, their tiny hands gripping the bottles. As she fed them, she spoke to them softly, playfully cooing at them as if they were the only ones in the room. She didn't seem to notice the heavy stares directed at her from every candidate seated nearby. They watched her with open curiosity, whispering among themselves. From a distance, Logan Hadrian observed the scene with even deeper interest. His sharp mind had been racing, trying to piece together who this woman was and why she had his children. The only logical conclusion he could come up with was infuriating. Their aunt, their one he entrusted them to, left them with a complete stranger. His own children, his heirs, were being paraded around in public as if they belonged to some commoner. The mere thought made his blood boil. Was this woman using them to gain favor? Had she brought them here to earn sympathy points for the job? The idea alone enraged him beyond measure. Without hesitation, Logan strode toward her with a commanding presence, his rich gait exuding authority. The moment he stepped forward, the candidates stiffened, their conversations falling silent. It was him, the CEO himself. Everyone immediately straightened their posture as a show of respect, all except one person, Nina. She barely seemed to notice his presence, completely immersed in talking to the babies in the stroller. Feeling thoroughly ignored, Logan cleared his throat loudly. Finally, Nina looked up. Her gaze landed on a tall, imposing man standing right in front of her. She studied him skeptically, wondering what he wanted. Behind him, she noticed the young employee from earlier, the one who had reacted so strangely to the boys. Her mind quickly pieced things together. She thought, "This must be his boss. Maybe he went to report me for bringing children here." A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Was there a no-child policy at this company? If so, why hadn't anyone told her? Why hadn't that young man simply informed her instead of running off to fetch his boss? This was a terrible look for her. Pushing aside her discomfort, Nina stood up and respectfully greeted the man. "Good morning, sir," she said, her tone polite but firm. Logan scrutinized her carefully. He had always been excellent at reading people, yet this woman puzzled him. Her reaction wasn't what he expected. She didn't seem guilty. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't even look like someone who recognized him. Most importantly, she didn't appear to connect him to the children in any way. That alone sent irritation flaring through him. Everyone else in the room was shaken by his presence. They were shifting in their seats, nervous because of his presence. Yet she stood there unaffected. Does she seriously not know who he is? What kind of job applicant doesn't know the CEO of the company they seek to work in? Nina, on the other hand, was growing increasingly uncomfortable. The man was just staring at her. He hadn't responded to her greeting, hadn't spoken a single word, but she could tell he was someone important here. Finally, he broke the silence. "I heard you're here for the job interview," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. Nina nodded. "Yes, sir." Without another word, Logan extended his hand. Nina blinked in confusion. He didn't say what he wanted. He simply stretched his hand out, palm open, like he was expecting her to give him something. She glanced around, trying to make sense of it. Then it clicked. Quickly, she rummaged through her bag and retrieved her file, the one containing her credentials. She handed it over, unsure if this was even part of the normal process. Logan took the file without a word and turned on his heel, walking off with it like it was his to take. Nina stood there, baffled. What just happened? She glanced around the room, but no one gave her any answers. The other candidates were now staring at her even more intensely, some glaring openly. Moments later, the younger employee returned, stopping in front of her. "Madam, it's your turn," he announced. The room went silent. Everyone, including Nina herself, was shocked. She had been the last to arrive, yet she was the first to be called in? This was a stroke of luck, but it didn't seem fair. Then again, could she even refuse? Maybe they saw her with the children and decided to take pity on her. Still, she had no idea what to do with the twins. Everyone in the room already seemed to dislike her. There was no chance any of them would help. She looked around, hesitating. The employees seemed to catch on. "You can go in with the boys," he said casually. Nina blinked. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "It won't be a problem." That surprised her. But she wasn't about to argue. Gathering her things, she adjusted the boys in their strollers and walked into the interview room. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. A panel of serious-looking officials sat before her. And, among them, him, the same man who had taken her file. He sat there, flipping through her documents with an unreadable expression. But even as he read, his sharp gaze remained locked onto her. Nina swallowed hard. The tension in the room made her feel like a caged bird. She had made it this far only to realize she wasn't prepared for this interview at all. Her mind was completely blank. She needed to think fast. She needed a strategy. And she needed one now. The twins let out small cries, their little faces scrunching up in distress. Nina turned to them immediately, concern flashing across her face. She quickly lifted them from their strollers, holding one in each arm. The moment they felt her warmth, their cries faded, replaced by contented sighs. They weren't hungry, nor were they in pain. They were just tired of being confined. "These boys are so possessive," she thought with a small smile. "They always want attention." The interview panel sat frozen in stunned silence. What was happening? Just moments ago, their CEO had unexpectedly entered the room, stating that he would personally interview the next candidate. And now, that candidate turned out to be a young woman with 2 babies. What were the chances of something like this happening? The tension in the room was thick, but finally, one of the female officials decided to break the silence. "Your sons are adorable," she said with a small smile. Nina glanced at her, hesitating. She wanted to correct the woman, tell her that the boys weren't actually hers. But what was the point? She had always wished they were. Besides, with how things were looking, she probably wasn't getting this job anyway. So, instead of explaining, she simply smiled and said, "Thank you." Regret seeped into her mind. What had she even been thinking? acting so hastily, making reckless decisions. Was this really the best way to fix her problems? Even if she had come here without the boys, her chances of getting this job would have been slim.
But now?
Bringing 2 babies to an interview, looking so unprepared. Who in their right mind would employ her? Still, she wasn't about to let this trip be completely pointless. If she was going to fail, she might as well have some fun with it. Across from her, Logan's piercing eyes remained fixed on her. He had been waiting, expecting her to correct his subordinate. Surely, she would clarify that the children weren't hers. But she didn't. Instead, she accepted the mistaken assumption. His fingers tightened slightly against the table, but his voice remained smooth. "So, Nina Opal, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir." His eyes stayed locked on hers, studying her closely. "Why do you want this job?" Nina took a deep breath, her gaze shifting downward. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Actually, sir, I'm sure you can all tell by now," she said softly, her voice wavering. "I'm a single mother." Logan's sharp stare darkened instantly. His jaw clenched. The rest of the panel members, however, looked visibly moved. Nina continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I struggle every single day to raise my sons on my own. It's getting harder and harder to pay bills, to put food on the table. Lately, I can barely afford to buy them milk," she said, swallowing back tears. "I'm just a young woman trying to provide for her children." Her arms tightened around the boys, holding them closer, as if shielding them from the world. "I couldn't even afford a babysitter or daycare. That's why I had no choice but to bring them here with me," she admitted. "I really need this job, sir. I don't want my children to starve." Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, her body trembling slightly. The oblivious twins simply snuggled into her, unaware of the emotional storm in the room. Logan, on the other hand, couldn't believe what he was hearing. The audacity of this woman. She clearly had no idea who he was. She had no idea that the children she was using for pity points were actually his. Here she was, lying so boldly, so shamelessly, to his face. His sons, his own flesh and blood, were clinging to her, treating him like a stranger. They looked at him, but there was no recognition in their eyes. But if this woman wanted to play games, he would play along. His voice was dangerously calm as he asked, "What about their father? Doesn't he help?" Nina scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, sir. Don't even mention that evil man." Logan's expression didn't change, but a sharp glint of warning flashed in his eyes. She had no idea. "How can he help me?" she continued bitterly. "He's a lazy, useless man. He has nothing important going on in his life." Logan felt an unfamiliar sensation spread through him. Was this woman seriously insulting him to his face? "He abandoned me to raise these boys on my own," she went on, completely unaware of the growing storm in front of her. "He got me pregnant and then disappeared, like the fool he is." Logan's fists clenched under the table. He should stop this. He should immediately put her in her place. But instead, he let her continue. And she did. "I don't even know what I was thinking, getting myself mixed up with that idiot," she ranted. "He's poor, and he's not even good-looking." Logan's eye twitched. "Excuse me? My sons got their great genes from me, not their father," she declared. "Thank goodness they don't look like him. He looks like a—" She paused, then scoffed. "A pig." Silence. Complete silence. Logan had never been more offended in his entire life. He could hear the blood rushing in his ears. The fact that she was talking about him like this, insulting him so freely, so viciously, with zero hesitation. It was infuriating. And yet she had no idea. She was too lost in her own performance, too absorbed in her self-made tragedy. Sometimes, Nina sighed dramatically, "I want to regret ever meeting him." Logan arched a brow. But she softened, pressing kisses to the twins' soft cheeks. "These adorable children came out of that relationship, and I want to give them the world. That's why I need this job so badly, sir." Her voice cracked at the end, and the twins, watching their mother look so sad, suddenly seemed distressed. Their little faces scrunched up again, eyes growing wet. Nina gasped. Oh, no, no, no. She cooed quickly, her tone shifting to a cheerful, playful one. Mommy's okay, see? She forced a bright smile, tickling their bellies and peppering their faces with kisses. The twins giggled, their earlier distress forgotten. But across from her, Logan was brooding. Horribly. He had just been called a pig, right to his face. And he couldn't even say anything. He inhaled deeply, then leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. Miss Opal, he said, his voice cool and measured. You said you can barely provide for your children, correct? Nina nodded earnestly. Yes, sir. Logan's lips curved slightly. The clothes they're wearing, he continued, his voice almost mocking now. Do you know what brand they're from? Nina blinked. She glanced at the baby clothes. They seemed normal, right? Just simple twin sets from a regular store. Those are designer editions, Logan informed her smoothly. From a French label that specializes in children's luxury wear. Each set costs $500. Nina's jaw dropped. She stared at the boys, then back at Logan, her brain refusing to process the words. Nina stared at the baby clothes on the twins, her fingers brushing over the soft fabric. Now that she paid closer attention, they did feel different, thicker, smoother, and definitely high quality. But why would anyone spend so much on clothes that children would outgrow in just a few months? She had always known the boys came from a wealthy family. It was obvious. A luxury car dropped them off every morning, and a personal driver was assigned just to chauffeur them around. But this was on another level. Before she could recover from the shock, Logan's voice broke through her thoughts. Those strollers are limited edition, he said casually, his tone unreadable. $5,000 each. Nina's eyes widened as she turned to look at the strollers she had been pushing around so carelessly. $5,000? Each? So $10,000 for baby strollers? She had been wheeling them through crowded streets, over uneven sidewalks, thinking they were just normal strollers. But now, it was like they had transformed into prized treasures before her very eyes. Logan leaned back, studying her reaction. So, tell me, Miss Opal, he said smoothly, how are you able to afford these things? Nina's mind went blank. Oh no. She had no idea. Her pulse quickened as she scrambled for an answer, forcing herself to think fast. Handouts, she blurted out. These are all handouts. I honestly had no idea they cost that much. She straightened her shoulders, forcing confidence into her voice. They were given to me by a charity group. You know, the kind that rich people donate to? They help single, struggling mothers like me. Logan's eyes narrowed slightly. I see, he murmured, but his tone was skeptical. Nina could tell. He didn't believe her. Not even a little. She needed to shift the conversation quickly. Sir, she said, putting on her best innocent expression, you seem very informed about children's accessories. Do you have kids? Logan gave a small nod. I do. I have 3 children. He paused, then asked, How many do you have? Nina was about to say 2 when something suddenly clicked in her mind. Her eyes widened. Hazel. She quickly pulled out her phone, checking the time. Oh my goodness, sir. I really need to get going, she gasped. Actually, I do have 3 children, just like you. And my daughter is about to be dropped off from school. I need to prepare lunch for her. She stood up abruptly, reaching for the twins to place them back into their strollers. Please, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, she says. I will excuse myself now. Logan didn't say anything. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, watching her with that same unreadable expression. What school is your daughter in? He asked. Nina's mouth opened automatically, ready to answer, but then she caught herself just in time. The school Hazel goes to. It is an international school, one of the most expensive in the country. Just one term's tuition could buy acres and acres of land in her village. She couldn't say that. She forced a smile. It's just a small school near my neighborhood, sir, she lied smoothly. Logan didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes told her he wasn't fooled. She quickly pushed forward. Please, I really need to go, she said. But if you do consider me for the position, I'd really appreciate it. And with that, She turned, gripping the stroller handles tightly as she pushed the twins out of the room. The moment the door shut behind her, Logan let out a slow breath, his eyes darkening. He still couldn't believe it. The audacity of that girl. He was intrigued. He let out a low scoff, shaking his head. "He's a pig, but you had 3 children for him?" he muttered under his breath. Stupid girl. But he wasn't the only one who had been shaken. The entire panel room remained silent, the officials still in a daze. What was that interview? It had felt personal, nothing like the formal, professional interviews they were used to. And the strangest part? Their perfectionist of a boss hadn't even been angry that a woman brought 2 children into an interview room. None of it made sense. But they dared not question him. Without another word, Logan stood up. "Continue with the interviews," he instructed, before strolling out of the room, Nina's file in his hands. That afternoon, Nina arrived home safely, exhausted but relieved. She placed the twins in their play area and immediately started preparing lunch. Not long after, the doorbell rang. She smiled, already knowing who it was. She wiped her hands and hurried to the door, swinging it open. "Hazel," she sang out, scooping up the little girl in a warm embrace. Hazel giggled, her tiny arms wrapping around Nina's neck. "How was school today?" Nina asked, setting her down. "It was great, Annie." Hazel beamed. Nina ruffled the girl's hair. "Good. Now go change. Lunch will be ready soon." Hazel grinned and dashed off excitedly. Nina sighed and returned to the kitchen. There was a strict diet plan for the children. 1 meal for Hazel, another for the twins, and then something simple for herself. It could be exhausting, but sometimes having structured meals made things easier. In the living area, Hazel played with the twins, their laughter filling the small home. And then, the doorbell rang again. Nina wiped her hands once more and called out, "Hazel, don't open the door." But she was too late. She heard the click of the door unlocking. That girl. Hazel loves opening doors. Nina walks out as she mildly reprimands the little girl. "Hazel, I told you not to open the—" Her words died in her throat. She froze. Her breath hitched. Standing in her home, right there, was him. The man who had interviewed her just over an hour ago. Her body stiffened in shock. What is he doing here? He hadn't even waited outside like a polite human being should. He had just walked in, like he belonged there. Hazel stood beside the door, now looking terrified, her tiny hands gripping the edge of her dress. Nina swallowed hard, quickly snapping out of her shock. She gestured for Hazel to come to her before turning back to the towering man in her home. Her voice was firm. "Sir," she said cautiously, "what are you doing here? How did you find my address?" Logan held up the file, her file, the one she had carelessly left behind. It only contained photocopies of her credentials, so she hadn't thought much about it. "I brought this," he said simply. Nina's eyes flickered to the file before settling back on him. She forced a small smile. "Thank you so much, sir." "You didn't need to," she said, hoping he would hand it over and leave. But he didn't. Instead, Logan's sharp eyes scanned the apartment, taking in every detail. His gaze landed on the twins, who were happily playing with their toys, and then on Hazel, who was quietly sitting on the couch. The whole place had a distinct childish feel: colorful stuffed animals, scattered building blocks, and small chairs meant for little legs. "You have beautiful kids," he commented. Nina stiffened. Her unease grew with every passing second. A stranger was standing in her house, in a home where 3 vulnerable children lived. Besides, if Fiona ever finds out about that someone came to her house without her permission, she would skin her alive. Logan's eyes wandered again, his expression unreadable. "This apartment is really nice," he remarked casually. "A high-end neighborhood as well. How do you afford it?" Nina's heart skipped a beat. This man, for some reason, he seemed determined to unravel her lies, to catch her in something. What did he want from her? She swallowed hard, keeping her voice steady. "It's not mine," she explained. "I can't afford rent, so my kids and I moved in with my sister." She hoped that answer would be enough, that he would drop the topic and leave. But Logan didn't move. He just stared at her. It was like he was waiting for her to slip, waiting for her to admit something. Nina felt a chill run down her spine. She let out an awkward laugh, forcing a cheerful tone. Sir, thank you for bringing my documents. I appreciate it. I hope I get the job. It was her way of politely telling him that the conversation was over. But Logan acted as if he didn't hear her. Nina clenched her jaw.
Fine.
Maybe he wasn't the type to pick up on subtle hints. She tried again. I'm actually busy making lunch, sir. The kids are really hungry now. Surely he would get the message this time. But he did the opposite. Great, he said, casually lowering himself onto the couch. Neither have I, which means I can join you and your beautiful children for lunch today. Nina's mouth fell open. What? She blinked rapidly, struggling to process the audacity of this man. He had invited himself, just like that. For a moment, she seriously considered throwing the nearest object at him. Her patience had reached its limit. Keeping an eye on him, she swiftly grabbed her phone and went to dial the security guards. She spoke calmly, telling them to come help remove a stranger from the house. Not long after, 2 security guards knocked at the door. Nina rushed to let them in, relief flooding her. She expected them to ask Logan questions, to escort him out. She had even instructed them to make it seem like a normal checkup, just to avoid drama. But, to her horror, the moment they saw Logan, they froze. And then, as if nothing was wrong, they greeted him politely and walked right out. Nina stared at them in shock. Wait. Hey, she called out. But they ignored her, disappearing down the hallway. She felt her stomach sink. Something was very wrong. Logan, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. He continued sitting there, watching her. Nina's mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything. Meanwhile, Logan leaned back, still watching her closely. His thoughts drifted. His ex-wife had left him when the twins were barely 2 months old. She had said the pressure of managing 2 babies was too much for her, that she hadn't signed up for it. Then, just like that, she had disappeared. From then on, Logan had relied on hired staff to take care of his children. It wasn't ideal, but it was his only option. Then Fiona, his wife's sister, had stepped in. She had offered to take care of the kids during the day, giving them the motherly love they deserved. It was a perfect arrangement. Logan had agreed immediately, especially since it was getting harder for old woman Helen to handle them alone. He had even offered for Fiona to move in to make things easier, but she had adamantly refused.
Now he understood why.
She stood to gain more by living on her own. Logan had given her this apartment. He also paid her a hefty monthly allowance for expenses. Whenever she requested more, he provided without question. He hadn't suspected anything because the reports had always been good. Helen and the driver said the children loved their aunt. Hazel often spoke about her with admiration. He himself had heard the little girl singing praises of her auntie quite a number of times. So, naturally, he had believed his kids were well cared for. And now, standing in this apartment, he realized that they were indeed being cared for, only by a different aunt. As Nina busied herself in the kitchen, she sighed in resignation. She had no choice but to serve lunch to the strange man who just wouldn't take a hint. If it was food he wanted, she would give him food. Then maybe, just maybe, he would finally leave. She set the table for everyone, including the strange man. Logan took his time eating, his eyes flickering between his meal and Nina, who was feeding the twins. Meanwhile, Hazel had been strangely quiet. This confused Nina. Hazel was normally a giddy, talkative child, even around strangers. But today, she was sitting there silently, eating in a robotic, almost stoic manner, as if it was an obligation. She wasn't throwing a fuss or complaining about the vegetables like always. Logan focuses on Nina, watching the way she handled the twins with such ease. "You're really good with kids," he said, genuinely impressed. Nina glanced at him briefly. She gave a small, proud smile. "Thank you," she said smoothly. "It comes naturally. Years of experience as a mother."
She brags.
Logan just kept staring at her, his expression unreadable. I have a job offer for you, he finally said. Nina's ears perked up instantly. You mean, I got the job? She asked, excitement bubbling in her voice. Of course not, he replied bluntly. I have a different job offer for you, one with better benefits.
Nina's heart sank.
That sounded too good to be true. But the truth was she needed a job.
Badly.
Okay, she said hesitantly. Tell me about it. Logan continued eating, taking slow, deliberate bites as if he were dining at a high-class restaurant. Well, as I told you earlier, I have 3 children and I need help with them. Since you're so great with kids, I'd like to employ you to take care of mine, he said casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nina froze, staring at him. Was he serious? Did he think she wasn't fit for a corporate job? Was this what she had been reduced to? A babysitter? Logan continued as if he hadn't noticed her shock. Your salary will be much more than what you would have earned working at the company, he added smoothly. It comes with accommodation, all bills covered, everything at your disposal. Your kids can move in as well. Nina's eyes widened. That much money? Just to be a nanny? Who was this man? She felt dizzy from the offer, from the sheer weight of what he was saying. The reason she had been job hunting so desperately was for financial security. It didn't really matter what job she did, as long as she was paid well. But then, she looked at the innocent children she had gotten so attached to over the past few months. And just like that, she knew her answer. Leaving them for a corporate job was already hard enough. But leaving them to go take care of someone else's kids? That was impossible. Her conscience would never allow her to do that. She took a deep breath. Sir, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice firm but polite. It's a great offer, but I can't leave my own kids to take care of someone else's. Maybe when they're older, but right now they need me more. Logan studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes searching her face. Think about it well, Ms. Opal, he said, his voice calm but intent. If you get a job right now, any job, you'll most likely have to leave them in someone else's care while you work. So, what's the difference? Nina sighed, looking down at the twins. There's still a difference, sir, she murmured. I can't explain it. She stared at her babies with a soft, loving gaze. By now, the kids had finished eating, and Nina knew it was time for their nap. She scooped up the twins and motioned for Hazel to follow. I'll just put them to sleep, she told Logan. He nodded, still watching her closely as she disappeared into the bedroom. For some reason, Nina found herself loosening up a bit about his presence. Maybe he wasn't just some strange man hanging around her home. Maybe he was simply a father looking for someone to take care of his kids. But still, she found the idea selfish. How could he expect a mother of toddlers to leave her own kids just to care for his? The apartment only had 2 rooms, so Nina shared hers with the children. She gently placed the twins on the bed. Just then, Hazel's quiet voice broke the silence. Auntie, she whispered. What is Daddy doing here? Nina blinked, confused. She turned to Hazel, who looked up at her with innocent, questioning eyes. Nina smiled, thinking it was just a child's misunderstanding. Oh, sweetie, she said softly. He's not your daddy. But as she looked at Hazel's serious face, something felt off.
She didn't know much about these kids.
Fiona never told her anything. Hazel never talked about her parents, not once. The only people she ever mentioned were their driver and their grandmother, the old woman who sometimes dropped them off. But now, she was calling a complete stranger her daddy? Nina frowned slightly. Something wasn't right. But it wasn't her place to ask questions. Fiona was the one who interacted with the driver and the grandmother. Fiona was the one who made all the rules. Nina had long since stopped trying to understand. All she could do was give these angels the love they deserved. She bathed each child, then gently coaxed them to sleep. Meanwhile, back in the living room, Logan had finished his meal. It was time. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Whatever was going on here, it was about to come to an end. At Fiona's boyfriend's house, laughter filled the air. Music played loudly. Fiona lounged comfortably, surrounded by her friends, a drink in her hand. Ever since she had taken on the responsibility of her niece and nephews, life had been easy. Logan sent her a hefty sum of money every month. So why would she bother getting a real job? She had everything she needed. Just then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her heart nearly stopped. Logan. Shock and excitement hit her all at once. He almost never called. It was always her reaching out to him. She quickly signaled for everyone to quiet down before answering. "Logan," she said, her voice honey-sweet. But the moment he spoke, her face drained of color. "I'm at the house," he said simply. Fiona's blood ran cold. Her hand tightened around her phone. No, no, no. She jumped to her feet, nearly knocking over a glass in her panic. Her friends stared as she frantically grabbed her purse. Ignoring their questions, she dashed outside, her fingers shaking as she called Nina. Over and over. But Nina didn't pick up. Damn it. Fear clutched at Fiona's throat. She knew what would happen if Logan found out the truth. That she never took care of the kids. That she let someone else do it. That she had been lying all along. How did he even get to the house? As far as she knew, Logan didn't even care about his children enough to visit them. Something was very, very wrong. Slamming her car door shut, she sped off. Her heart pounded in terror. If Logan found out, she was finished. Nina had just finished putting the kids to bed when she heard noises outside. Her heart skipped a beat. What now? She rushed out, muttering to herself. Why is that strange man still here? Why hasn't he left yet? But when she stepped into the living room, her blood ran cold. Fiona was back, and the man was still there. "I'm finished." Nina froze, bracing herself for the explosion she was sure was coming. But to her shock, Fiona's face was all smiles. "Nina, there you are. Come and help me with the bags." "I bought a lot of things we were running out of," Fiona called cheerfully, her arms full of shopping bags. Nina stood still, completely baffled. Why isn't she angry? Why is she back early? And since when does she buy groceries? Didn't she refuse to buy anything this morning? Still confused, she hesitantly walked over and took some of the bags. "I even got some things for the kids," Fiona added, her voice unnaturally sweet. "I hope they had lunch and are now sleeping like I asked you to ensure." Nina almost dropped the bags in disbelief. What is she even talking about? Her eyes darted to Logan, who was still seated so casually, watching everything unfold with mild amusement. What is going on here? It didn't take long for Nina to piece it together. Fiona was acting. She must have noticed the guest and didn't want to expose her true self in front of him. Maybe she even had a crush on him. Nina couldn't blame her. The man was, without a doubt, one of the most attractive men she had ever seen. Too bad he's probably in a serious relationship, being a father of 3 and all, Nina thought. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind trying my luck with him myself. "Come on, help me take everything to the kitchen," Fiona said in her sickly sweet voice before turning and heading toward the kitchen. Nina followed, her heart pounding. The moment they were alone, Fiona's entire demeanor changed. Her face twisted into that familiar look, cold, furious, dangerous. Nina swallowed hard. "What did you tell him?" Fiona's voice was a deadly whisper. Nina was caught completely off guard. She had expected Fiona's first question to be, "Who is that man?" and "What is he doing here?" Instead, this. I didn't say anything," Nina stammered. "You better hope so," Fiona hissed, her eyes dark with warning. "Because if you did, I will ruin you." Without another word, she spun around and walked back to the living room. Nina stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart pounding in confusion. Her concerns are really misplaced, she thought. Shaking off the tension, she hesitantly followed Fiona. And what she saw shocked her. Fiona was seated with Logan, chatting so casually, like she was trying to impress him. Nina could immediately see why. Logan was gorgeous. But something else nagged at her. Why isn't Fiona asking who he is? Why isn't she even a little curious? Not that I know who he is either, Nina thought. I don't even know his full name. As if answering her thoughts, Fiona suddenly turned to Logan with a bright smile. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" she said sweetly. "I would have waited and prepared a nice meal for all of us instead of rushing to the store." Logan barely reacted. "That's fine. Your friend prepared lunch, and we enjoyed it, he replied smoothly. Fiona stiffened for a split second, her smile faltering. But she quickly recovered. Oh, I'm glad she took good care of you, she said with a forced smile. Her eyes flicked to Nina, who was staring at the interaction in disbelief. Then Fiona's smile widened as she called out, Nina, come here. Let me introduce you formally. Nina's stomach twisted in dread. She took slow steps forward, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. When she reached them, Fiona gestured toward her with an almost mocking cheerfulness. Logan, this is Nina. As you must already know, she's my friend. She usually helps me with the kids when I need to run errands, she said with a sugary smile. Then she turned to Nina. And Nina, this is Logan Hadrian. He's the father of those adorable children we've all come to love so much. Her tone was so casual, like it was something Nina already knew. But Nina didn't. The air was knocked out of her lungs. She felt lightheaded, like the ground beneath her had disappeared. Her body started shaking. Her eyes darted to Logan, then back to Fiona. Wait, what did you just say? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her entire body was trembling now. Fiona, who is he? She asked urgently, her voice breaking. Fiona's expression darkened slightly. And then she saw it. The way Logan was looking at Nina. His eyes were locked on her, filled with interest. A smirk tugged at the corners of his lips. Fiona hated it. Her irritation flared, but she quickly masked it. She cleared her throat loudly, trying to pull Logan's attention away from Nina. So, Logan, she said briskly, I'm surprised to see you here. Not that you're not welcome, of course, but I assume you came for a reason, right? She was hoping to distract him, but it didn't work. His eyes were still on Nina. Then, finally, he spoke. I came to pick up my children, he said smoothly. He leaned back, his smirk deepening. But your friend here refused to let them go with me. That's why I called you. Maybe she doesn't trust me. His voice was calm, but his words sent a sharp sting through Nina's chest. Embarrassment crashed into her like a tidal wave. Her stomach twisted in knots. She had never, ever, in her life felt this humiliated. Regret clawed at her throat. She wished she could disappear. Every nerve in her body burned with discomfort. Nina felt hot and cold at the same time. Her body was frozen, yet her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. What are the chances of this happening? She had been such a fool. Her mind went blank. She completely zoned out, staring at nothing, avoiding Logan's gaze like her life depended on it. Fiona, desperate to figure out what was going on between them, quickly helped Logan carry the sleeping kids to his car. Meanwhile, Nina sat motionless, lost in a daze. When Fiona returned, she was fuming. Now explain everything to me in detail, she shouted. Why didn't you call me when he arrived? Why didn't you answer my calls? And why on earth would you invite Logan for lunch with you? Do you like him? Nina snapped out of her trance, her stomach twisting with panic. Fiona, I had no idea, she protested. I didn't invite him for lunch. He just showed up and said he wanted to join us. She carefully concealed the most crucial details. If Fiona knew the full truth, she would throw her out in an instant, and then Nina's life in the city would be over before she even got the job she came for. Fiona's eyes flashed with rage. Shut up, Nina, she snapped. Stop lying to me. I know Logan. He doesn't just do things like that. What did he ask you? And what did you tell him? Nothing. I didn't tell him anything, Nina insisted, trying to sound calm. He arrived when we were about to have lunch, and he just joined us. After that, I left him in the living room and went to put the kids down for their nap. Then he called you. That's it. We never spoke. I promise. Fiona glared at her, studying her face for any sign of a lie. Nina did her best to look completely oblivious. After a long silence, Fiona finally scoffed. For your own sake, you better be telling the truth, she warned, her voice low and dangerous. If you ruin this for me, back to the village you go. Then her eyes darkened further as she took a step closer. And listen well, she hissed. Logan is mine. Forget about him. Not that you stand a chance against me anyway. So stay in your lane. With that, she stormed out, leaving Nina alone with her thoughts. Nina's head was spinning. She started piecing everything together. The way Logan had suddenly appeared at the company for her interview. The strange questions he had asked her. The way he had stared at the twins. It all made sense now. Her heart dropped as she grabbed her phone and did a quick search, something she should have done before walking blindly into the company like an idiot. And there it was. Logan Hadrian was the owner of the company where she had applied for a job. Nina felt sick. No wonder he had shown up at the interview. No wonder his questions had felt more like an interrogation. No wonder the security guards had acted so weird when she tried to send him away. Goodness. She had walked into his company and lied to his face, shamelessly claiming his children as her own. She had practically humiliated herself right in front of him. Now she understood why he had followed her home. And worst of all, she had dragged his 1-year-olds all over the city just to attend an interview. No wonder he took them away. He probably didn't want his children near a liar. He had completely lost trust in her. But the biggest disaster of all? If Fiona ever found out the full truth, she would never let Nina stay. And that night, Nina's worst fears came true. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when Fiona burst through the door. Her face was twisted with rage. Nina's heart sank. Without saying a word, Fiona marched straight to Nina's bedroom. A few seconds later, she emerged, carrying Nina's bags. Then, without hesitation, she threw them into the living room. Nina's clothes and personal items scattered across the floor. Nina rushed over, her chest tightening with panic. "What are you doing?" she cried. Fiona spun around, eyes blazing. "I'm kicking you out," she shouted. "I warned you, Nina. I told you to keep your mouth shut, but you just had to run your mouth, didn't you? Your tongue has no boundaries." "I didn't say anything to him," Nina protested desperately. "I don't know what you're talking about." Fiona let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, shut up," she spat. "Logan suddenly shows up to take his children away, and now he just called me to say that the kids will never be brought here again. Do you know what that means?" Nina stood there, speechless, her heart hammering in her chest. "You caused this," Fiona screamed. "And now, you're useless to me. I brought you here to take care of them, but you ruined that chance. Now get out." Nina begged. She pleaded with every ounce of desperation in her body. She even asked if she could just stay for one night. But Fiona wasn't having it. Without mercy, she shoved Nina toward the door and threw the last of her things outside. The door slammed shut behind her. Nina stood there in shock, staring at the locked door. She had nowhere to go. She didn't have a single coin on her. She didn't even know where to start. And worst of all, she couldn't go back to the village in a state worse than when she left. Everyone believed she had come to the city for job hunting. She couldn't return empty-handed. Nina gathered her scattered belongings from the cold hallway floor, her fingers trembling slightly as she stuffed them back into her bags. With a heavy sigh, she stepped into the elevator, her heart weighed down by uncertainty. She had no choice but to beg the security guards to let her sleep in their shelter for the night. Tomorrow would sort itself out. Her stomach grumbled, reminding her of the meal she never got to eat. "Fiona didn't even let me have the food I cooked," she thought bitterly as she dragged her bags out of the elevator, struggling under their weight. "Let me help you with that, madam," a voice said. She turned, startled, and saw a middle-aged man walking toward her. Nina's eyes widened in recognition. It was Joshua, the driver who usually took the kids around. She was too shocked to speak. "I was asked to come wait for you and pick you up in case you got kicked out," Joshua explained with a friendly smile. Nina stiffened. What was that supposed to mean? Had Logan planned this? Had he instigated Fiona to throw her out? Her mind flashed back to their lunch earlier that day. Logan had offered her a job, babysitting his children, with very tempting perks. She had been drawn to the idea but ultimately refused. Because of the kids. And now here she was, homeless. And suddenly, Logan's offer was back on the table. It's a win-win situation, she reasoned with herself. I'll still be with the kids, and I'll get paid for it. Facing Logan would be beyond embarrassing, but she could manage. She would simply avoid the topic as much as possible. At least she'd have a warm bed tonight. On the drive, Nina bombarded Joshua with questions. She wanted to know everything. The ride felt too short, but she was relieved to learn that Logan always came home late. That meant she wouldn't have to face him tonight. When they arrived at the house, a kind old lady and a maid greeted her warmly. "Come, dear, have dinner with us," the old lady offered kindly. But Nina was too drained. Despite being so hungry, she didn't want to risk having an encounter with the man she had lied to the whole day. Imagine him coming home to find her gobbling food in his house just a few minutes after she arrived. "Thank you, but I just want to rest," she said softly. The kids were already asleep, so after she was shown to her room, she collapsed into bed. It was the most comfortable sleep she had in a long time. Strangely, even though she was in a new place, she slept like a baby. Logan arrived home late as always. He had already been informed of Nina's arrival earlier in the day. After she left the company that afternoon, he had launched a full investigation into her. He wanted to know everything: who she was, how she ended up caring for his children instead of their aunt, and what he discovered surprised him. His admiration for her only grew. She wasn't doing it for money. She wasn't doing it for status. She was taking care of his children purely out of love. And the way she had handled the situation at the company, her quick thinking and sharp wit truly impressed him. "She's one crazy girl," he thought with a small smirk. The more he learned, the clearer it became. Hazel and the twins adored her. She is the aunt they normally sing praises about. That's when he made his decision. He had to get her for them. He knew Fiona's nature all too well. It hadn't taken much to push her into kicking Nina out. He wasn't the best father in the world, but he wanted the best for his children. And there was just something about the way Nina was with them, something that warmed his heart. The next morning, the mansion was filled with a piercing, high-pitched shrill. A girlish, childish squeal. It echoed through the massive house. Logan jerked awake, heart pounding. He leaped out of bed and rushed toward his daughter's room. But just as he reached the door, he froze. Through the slightly open door, he could hear giggles. Happy, excited giggles. Curious, he pushed the door open slightly. And what he saw made him pause. Hazel was glowing with happiness, her arms tightly wrapped around Nina in a hug. Helen and the maid had also rushed over, but upon seeing the heartwarming sight, they stayed silent, watching. Nina and Hazel held onto each other like long-lost friends. Hazel could barely contain her excitement. Her auntie was here, and she was helping her get ready for school for the first time. The little girl practically bounced with joy, refusing to let Nina go. "I don't want to go to school today," Hazel whined playfully. "You have to go," Nina said with a chuckle. "But don't worry, I'll be right here when you come back. And then we'll play lots of games. And bake some cookies together, anything you want." Hazel beamed. That was the only reason she agreed to go. She didn't even care about school anymore, only the promise that Nina would be waiting for her when she returned. Nina would have accompanied her to school, but she also wanted to go see the twins. And when she did, the boys were just as thrilled to see her. They were too young to speak clearly, but the moment she walked in, their little faces lit up with pure joy. They knew something was different. Seeing Nina this early in the morning wasn't normal. And they loved it. Days passed quickly. Nina was truly enjoying her time with the children. But the kids weren't her only focus. In all her attempts to avoid Logan, she had unknowingly turned into a spy, which over time developed into something closer to a stalker. The house is huge, so avoiding him was easy. And Logan had an unbreakable routine, one Nina had quickly memorized. Through Helen, she learned something else. He was single. Completely, totally single. And well, a girl could dream, right? The grand mansion had a quiet, predictable rhythm in the mornings. One that Nina had memorized by heart. Every day, just before dawn, she would silently slip out of her small room near the nursery. She would move carefully through the halls to her usual hiding spot, one with the perfect view of the dining hall. There, at the long polished table, Logan sat, having his breakfast. Dressed in a crisp, well-fitted suit, Logan looked effortlessly handsome. His dark hair was neatly brushed, his sharp jawline pronounced even as he took slow sips of his coffee. The deep timbre of his voice, though distant, sent an unexplainable shiver down Nina's spine whenever he spoke on the phone. She watched from the shadows, captivated. The way his lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear but wished to, left her breathless. Her heart pounded in her chest, yet she remained frozen in place, foolishly drawn to a man who had no idea she was there, or so she hoped. Then came her favorite part, the moment he stood to leave. His tall, strong frame moved with effortless grace, each step firm and purposeful. The fabric of his suit hugged his broad shoulders perfectly, adding to the commanding presence he carried so naturally. Nina peeked from behind a pillar, barely breathing, her fingers gripping the cold surface as if to steady herself. From the hallway window, she watched as he stepped outside. His sleek, dark car was already waiting. The moment he slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel, something about the way his fingers curled around it made her pulse race. Then came the deep rumble of the engine. And just like that, he was gone. The house fell silent once more, leaving Nina alone with her hopeless dreams. But nighttime brought a new kind of longing. When the clock struck late, she found herself behind the heavy drapes of the living room, peeking at the driveway. And then he arrived. The headlights of his car sliced through the darkness, casting fleeting shadows across the walls. He stepped out, looking effortlessly breathtaking even after a long day. His crisp white shirt was now slightly unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up, revealing his strong forearms. There was a quiet dominance in the way he carried himself, exhaustion lining his features, yet his presence still filled the space around him. Nina clutched the curtain, her heart aching. She had fallen too deep, into a love she knew was impossible. Yet, she remained a silent admirer. A dreamer lost in the quiet beauty of a man who would never even acknowledge her existence. But one night was different. It was a Saturday, and Logan had come home early. That only meant one thing: he had brought work home. Nina had been informed that he had requested her presence in his office. The news sent a strange mix of excitement and dread through her. Had he finally noticed her? She had almost believed he wasn't even aware of her existence in the house. Maybe he had been ignoring her all this time. But if that were true, she wished she could ignore him just as easily. Unfortunately, her heart was a stubborn thing. Now, standing in his grand home office, Nina stole hesitant glances at him. He looked even more handsome when he worked. His focus was sharp, his strong hands gripping the files with such interest that she almost envied them. "Miss Opal," he finally spoke, his voice smooth but firm. "It seems you've been avoiding me in my own house. Can I know why?" His attention remained on the documents, but his words sent a jolt through her. Nina was momentarily at a loss for words, but only for a second. "Of course not, sir," she replied quickly. "Why would I avoid you?" "I'm not sure," Logan mused, still scanning his documents. "But that's what I want to find out." Then, without warning, he lifted his gaze, pinning her in place. "Perhaps you're avoiding me because I caught you in a blatant lie. And now, you're too embarrassed to face me." Nina's breath hitched. So, he hadn't forgotten. She had known it was only a matter of time before he threw her lie back in her face. But she had already endured the embarrassment for days.
She wasn't going to crumble now.
"Why would I be embarrassed about that?" she challenged, her voice steady. "I didn't do anything wrong." Logan leaned back slightly, his brows raising in disbelief. She really had the audacity to stand here and act like this? Shouldn't she be begging for mercy by now? "You lied to me," he reminded her coldly. "You claimed my children as yours, again and again. And you haven't even apologized for it." Nina's jaw tightened. "Why should I apologize?" she shot back. "I am more of a parent to them than you are." Logan's sharp eyes narrowed. He studied her closely, as if searching for even a flicker of shame. There was none. His voice dropped to a dangerously low tone. "What is that supposed to mean?" It was the kind of tone that made his subordinates tremble.
But Nina? She did not care.
"It means exactly what I said," she stated boldly. "Yes, I lied. And yes, you're a horrible father. So, none of us is perfect. Let bygones be bygones, okay? Then, before her defenses could fully crumble under his piercing stare, she spun around and rushed out of the office, leaving Logan behind, staring after her in stunned silence. Logan sat in his office, lost in thought. Nina's words echoed in his mind, and the truth of them stung more than he cared to admit. He had heard it before from family, from friends, even from his own conscience. He knew he was a terrible father. His children adored Nina in a way they had never looked at him. She was their safe space, their joy, their warmth. The way they laughed and clung to her, the way she loved them so naturally, it made something inside him ache. He wanted to be part of it. He wants them to depend on him and cling on to him as well. For the first time in a long while, the house was filled with chatter and laughter. The emptiness he had grown used to was now replaced with life. So, on Sunday, he decided to stay home for the first time in weeks. Of course, he was still working, though. Nina didn't think much of it at first, until she was suddenly summoned to his office again. Her heart pounded. Was he going to fire her? Scold her for her reckless words the night before? If so, she was ready. She had already prepared a dramatic sob story, one that involved tears, desperation, and just the right amount of guilt to make him let her stay. But to her shock, Logan wasn't angry. He wasn't even cold. He was polite. "Ms. Opal," he started, his voice calm. "I thought about what you said. And you're right. I am a bad father." Nina blinked, her mouth slightly open. Did she hear that correctly? Logan admitting she was right? He continued before she could fully process it. "So, since you are such a great mother to them, I wondered perhaps you could help me be a good father?" For a moment, Nina just stared at him. She searched his face, trying to find any trace of sarcasm, any sign that he was mocking her. But all she saw was a serious, expectant gaze. Her stomach flipped. "Are you?" She swallowed, trying to contain her excitement. "Asking me for help?" Logan gave a slow nod. A wide grin spread across Nina's face. "Oh, this is going to be fun." "So," she said, leaning slightly forward, "you'll do anything I say, right?" Logan narrowed his eyes slightly. He could see the mischief twinkling in hers. He had no idea what she was up to, but he was intrigued. "Within reason," he responded cautiously. Nina bit her lip, already forming a plan. This was her chance. She was going to be selfish. While teaching him how to be affectionate with his children, she was going to make sure she got some of that affection for herself.